catch up. All right, so here's our version of Blender, right? So let's go back to Sakai. Let's go in here. And the first thing you guys want to do, and again, you could pretty much follow along with this video if the audio is, hopefully the audio it records very well, is you want some kind of reference. You could use something like PureRef, which you download from pureref.com. And this is what I have you guys do in the video. And what's nice about PureRef, this program, is you can right click, you can copy the image, and then you can just paste it inside of your Control V. And this image, the part PureRef allows you to have a reference image that sits on top of your scene here. An alternative way, which I'm going to show you here, which I don't cover in the video, is you right click, you save the image on your desktop or wherever. Like maybe I'll save it in my pictures here. And if you don't have a lot of space on your computer to use this as a reference to model from, you can actually save the image off, and then inside of Unity, so let's go to our pictures here. I can actually grab this and just drop it inside of Blender. Forgive me, I'm going to say Unity. You're like, what the hell is Unity? And it'll create something called an empty. Now, what an empty does is it's an empty node, which all it does is it displays the image. So if I go in here and I go into my camera and I hit render, notice that, come on, that's not a big thing to render. Oh man, is it really spinning up for that, like a cube? Let me stop it. Let me try one more time. Render image. There we go. Notice that it rendered the cube, but it didn't render this image. So this image is just a placeholder for, it's just a placeholder that exists in your scene, but it's never going to show up in the actual final render. So it's an empty object that's used for something. These things are not just used for modeling, but you would have empty objects sometimes inside of a virtual world. If I have like a Star Wars character or something and he's walking with a realistic person, I'll sometimes use an empty object and I'll animate it as a placeholder to interact with a real world person or character. For now, we're just going to use it as a visual indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and press N, or you can just click this little line here. And this opens up our transform settings for my empty. So I'm going to select my empty and do like a hard left press or double click. And I'm just going to name this spaceship ref. Now, you can see here that all of the location, rotation, and everything has these values, and it's based on the camera angle when I dragged it in. So I'm just going to go in and left click and just click on this, hit 0, and just tab down and zero out all of these things. Let me go ahead and select this cube, hit X, and then delete that. Now what I want to do is, now it's all completely zeroed out. What I'd like to do is have this reference image upwards because the Z axis is up and now it's laying flat. So again, if you're following along, I'm going fast, forgive me. If you press N, it'll bring up these settings. So I'm going to select my spaceship ref here, and I can actually just type into the X axis here 90, and that'll rotate it up 90 degrees. Or the hotkeys, for those of you who are like me who love hotkeys, you can hit R to rotate it, and then whatever axis, right? This is the axis, which is X here. I'm going to rotate it, hit X, and then I'm just going to type 90, and that'll do the same thing without having to have that open. Next thing is I'm just going to select this, and you can grab your move tool and you can move it up, or you can hit G and then Z, because we have our Z axis here, and I'm just moving this above the ground there. Okay, so that's setting up an image plane. The problem is, as I'm going to create objects, I'm going to be clicking on stuff, and it gets annoying. I want to lock this thing in place. I'm just kind of moving it back a little bit. I want to lock this in place to model from. So over here in my scene, you'll see there's this little guy here. It's a filter. And if I click on that filter, I want to turn on selectable. And what this allows me to do is with my spaceship ref selected, I can uncheck selectable. And now I can't select this. See how I can select that light? So that's step one, like on setting up image references. When you look at those characters that I made before, notice a lot of times I will either concept it myself or I'll have another concept artist on my team create a building or a character or whatever. you would take these image planes and you'd set them up in the 3D environment for modeling, right? When I was working on Nihai Kowlin, I did like a billion characters. Like I had actual reference of Nihai Kowlin when I was doing the Nickelodeon stuff. And so I like used that as a thing so I could model her head to make the shape. And depending on the studio, like when I was doing stuff for Cartoon Network, they were like high all the time. Like the director would come in and like one time he sent me concept art and he didn't even realize, he thought I made the concept art. So like some studios are so off the wall, like they're people, that it's like you're surprised. Nickelodeon, on the other hand, they take their IP unbelievably serious. Like they were, when I had the model up, and you're taking a 2D flat image and you're traversing it, you're turning it into 3D. So there's orthographic versus perspective view, like there's depth perception things. And they were like measuring in between Dora the Explorer's eyes, or like Nihao, the difference between this from her hair to the top of her head, to make sure that like the perfection behind their pieces. So they like so every studio you work at, you're gonna find a different level of perfection. So just putting that in there. Back to the assignment. So we have our reference set up. Whether you're working on a character or whatever, you're always gonna have to have reference. If you've seen one of the King Kong movies from some time ago, they filmed all of New York and then they looked at 1920s reference and they rebuilt the city so it matched it. The next thing is we need some sort of shape to model from. You could go in here and you could model this from a cylinder and adjust it. I like to model everything out of a cube and smooth it out. So I'm going to just teach you that method. I do everything from a cube. So I'm going to hit Shift A, or you can go up here to Add, Mesh, and let me move this out of the way. Mesh, and then I'm just going to add a cube. Or, like I said, let me delete this. Shift, for those of you on a Mac, you have to hit X and then hit delete. Shift A, Mesh, and I'm going to add a cube. Now, I'm going to click this little dot here, the minus Y here, and you can see my cube is in the front. You can also, if you have a side keyboard, you can press 1. And I'm going to move this up. Now, what I'd like to do is shape this into the shape of this thing here, but I can't see through it. How do I see through it? Well, there's a couple ways of doing it. One is you could use X-ray mode. So I'm going to hit Alt and Z. Alt and Z. There we go. And now with this selected, you can see, I can now see through this character. I'm holding Alt and C. I don't know, does Option Z work? I don't know if anybody's, it does work? Oh, cool. Are you able to, am I going too fast or no? Okay. So with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and hit 0, or I'm going to click, or I'm going to hit 1, sorry. Or I'm going to click on this little minus Y here to look at it. Now with this cube selected, what I want to do is I want to smooth this out and I want to edit it. This is called subdivision modeling, which is like kind of like playing with a ball of clay. So over here, we have our modifier panel here, and this is an unbelievably important section. This is where all of your modifiers for like cool things are. I'm just going to hit Control and 2, or you can click on with this thing selected. So Control 2. And you can see here, I'm actually going to turn on, or you can hit Add Modifier, and you can type in the search subdivision. And that'll add a subdivision surface modifier. Another thing I want to do, because it's hard to see, let me kind of make this like level 1 or something. Let me click on this. I'm having a hard time seeing my model inside here, so I want to see a wireframe. So I'm going to click on this, let's see, this little drop down next to this, which is my overlays. And I'm just going to turn on wireframe. And you can see now that gives me that nice orange on top. I can also adjust, let's see. I mean, that's about the highest opacity in the color opacity. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and edit this. So I'm going to change it from object mode to edit mode here. And you can see here that it keeps the same shape of that cube, because all subdivision does is it gives you a fake smoothed out view. So if I uncheck this, you can see it's just a cube that's smoothed out. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, press 1, and I'm going to start shaping this up. So there's a couple things to do here. You can see here there's this loop cut tool, and it's Control R. That's what I mostly do. So I'm going to hit Control and R, and I'm going to add a cut in the center there. And I'm just going to left click. This applied an edge here, and it's helping me hold the shape. And I'm going to use that to just kind of keep the middle ground of my ship. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab my move tool, hold the left mouse button down, select this, and just drag this up to the top. And then I'm going to hit S for scale and scale this down. Alternatively, I can use this scale tool here and then click on the little this little circle here, and I can scale that down. So I'm just trying to capture the shape. And I'm not terribly concerned with capturing it perfectly because it's actually, I don't think it's very symmetrical. Or actually, this image plane might need to, yeah, I think there's more fat on this side. So I'm just going to get like a rough shape here for the capsule. So same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and hit 1. I'm going to highlight this bottom part here. Hit S, and I'm going to scale that down. And I can hit Alt-Z here so you can see, just so I'm getting that shape. Now it's flat on the bottom. So the last tool I'm going to use, so I'm just kind of giving you guys the shortcuts. They're all here. Is I'm going to go to edge mode here, and I want to make sure that I'm selecting all of these edges. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use the edge crease tool. I'm going to move it to the right, and now you can see I flattened it out. Now, you guys aren't going to do any more modeling outside of this spaceship for the rest of the semester. If this interests you, like I could get you better tutorials. So really, the ring tool and the edge loop tool is really the only modeling tools that I'm going to have you guys do. So let's go ahead and let's do another one. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to hit Alt-Z. I'm going to go ahead and add a object here that's going to sit on top of this. That's going to represent this circle for the glass. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, and I'm going to, actually, I want to go to object mode here. But now we have this thing. I'm going to hit Shift-A. I'm going to go to mesh, and I'm going to add a torus. Now, I don't need it this high poly, so I can click on add torus here, and I can just adjust the segment. So I'm going to take this down to maybe 24. And I'm going to play with the radius. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make the miter radius a little bit more on the inside, a little fatter. So let's go back up here. I'm going to move it out and in front here. Go back to my front here. Hit Alt and Z so I can line this up. And I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees on X. Position this right in the middle. And then hit S to scale this down. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Like I could have made it much thinner when I first created it. And then I'm just going to push this inside of here like that. I might actually just kind of rotate that back a little bit. So that's kind of the thing, is just creating the basic shapes. And this is the same thing in modeling anything. Like if you look at these buildings on the outside of this house, outside of this thing, you'll notice there's a lot of repetition, right? Like things are molded. They're built in a specific way so they can be duplicated. Like all of the windows look the same. Like the brick on top, like when we're modeling it, like if I was going to model that building for a film or a video game, I would literally just make one window and I just copy it a million times. And that's really kind of the architect of the universe, right? Like when you look around, like things are so common and so, with the exception of the church that's there because they came from a different era where they probably prided themselves. But even that, underneath the window, those gables, they're just molded. It's poured concrete in a mold that they copied and they just kind of faceted to the building. Okay. So I'm not going to model the whole thing because I do have a video on that. I want to get into the next phase. So once you have this, right, you have like your build. Let's assume that I modeled all these other pieces, right? And if you want to, once I'm finished with this lecture and you guys are all working, if someone's like, could you please finish the spaceship and just do the whole thing? I'll do it because I want to give you guys time to work and for me to help you. All right, so what we're going to talk about next. So there's 3 steps to the process. One is modeling. So this is the modeler's job. Bigger studios or bigger film companies have a budget where they just have somebody who's a texture artist, and that's somebody who just paints the spaceship. Like I said, budgets are shrinking, and especially if you're working on an indie project or a project that only has a few $1 million, you're going to have to model texture and you're going to have to rig this thing. So the second step in this process is called the texturing process, and that's broken up into 2 parts. One, you have to create almost a 2-dimensional version of this image that you have to paint on. So let me show you what I'm sort of talking about. So let's type in Coca-Cola manufacturing cans or something. Let's see if I can bring up an image. When things are manufactured in the real world, let's see, Coca-Cola manufacturing can labels. The can labels are made on a flat. They're printed on a flat image, like a flat metal, like either heated onto the can itself or directly onto the metal, the aluminum itself, and then it goes through a machine, and that machine will bend it into the shape of a can. So the process, whenever you're modeling something, the 3D process, it always does its best to emulate the way things are done in the real world or real life. Like even like if you look at a box, like Coca-Cola um, box, I don't know, like let's just see if it has one like broken up. The boxes are printed flat and then they're assembled. Just take my word for it. I have to find the image. That's the way it works. So we have to actually make a two-dimensional version of this thing to paint on. Let me kind of show you. We're going to do this like a quick and dirty way. It's called UV unwrapping or unwrapping or pulling apart a model. That actually comes from the world of sewing because the way clothes are made as well is like it's made as a flat thing and it's you're unwrapping and you're stitching and sewing. So a lot of that same terminology exists in 3D. So what I want to do is I have this modifier here that's making my it's just adding smoothness to this spaceship, right? So what I want to do is I want to apply this because this actually isn't, it's just giving us a visual representation. So I'm going to click on this drop arrow. I'm going to hit apply, and that's going to apply this. And I'm going to right click, and now it's actually applied. There's no more modifier. If I click on this, this is what it is. It's turned into a mesh. Now it looks very faceted. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to remove my wireframe so you can see this. So we want it to look nice and smooth like this. So I'm just going to select it. I'm going to right click and do shade smooth. I'm going to do the same thing here, shade smooth. All right. Let's do that UVing process. Okay. And like I said, we're going to do this the easiest way possible, just so I can get you guys moving quickly. But I'm going to show you in here the right way to do it. And the other way, I have you click a button and then you move on. So with this selected, I'm going to go to my UV editing section. If you look at the top here, there's layout, there's modeling, and that takes you to this editor where you click on editor. And then you have UV editing. You have sculpting, which is like how you would sculpt this kind of like my Frankenstein guy you just saw, like he's all sculpted. Then you have UV editing. We're not sculpting this guy, like we're not adding cracks or anything. And this is the window you want to be in, is this UV editing window. And then next, like I said, they have it perfectly laid out for you because this is the process. Next we're going to go into texture painting. We're actually going to paint our ship so it looks like this. So let's go back to UV editing. And what I'd like is, this is the two-dimensional space I was talking about that represents this ship body. So I need these two to sync up. So this is something that I don't know why this step exists. I have no idea why Blender does it. It should just do this automatically, but there's something I'm missing. But there's two arrows up here that I want to clarify that you have to click. And that's what syncs up these two views. Again, I don't know why they do it that way. There's probably some reason. You could right now be done. You could go on to texture painting and paint it, but the quality won't be there because it's all compacted. So what we need to do is we need to cut seams like we would for a piece of pants or like this shirt, like there's a seam here. Pull it apart so we can draw on it flat. So with that said, you want to make sure that in this view, you're in edit mode. And I'm going to select edge here or press 2. And I'm going to hold the Alt key down and I'm going to left click. And that's going to create a crease all the way around my model. So I'm going to go to the side view here. And that's just Alt and left click. Like I said, I'm going to post this once it's done rendering. Hopefully it's the same on a Mac. So I'm going to hold Control. Let me hit Alt Z so you can see inside of it. And I'm going to remove the selection by holding Control of that edge. I only want one edge down the back of this seam, and I don't want this on the bottom. So there's only one seam here. So what I'm going to do is when I hit this button to unwrap it, it's going to cut or pull apart the ship from the back, from the seam. So I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to do Mark Seam, like I would as if I was a seamstress. And then add a cut here. This didn't affect the geometry. It's just for the next step in the process, which is tearing this thing apart. By default, it already created a seam on the bottom, but I'm going to do it again anyway. So I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to go around and hold Alt and Shift, and just click this. And I'm going to select all of the edges that make up the bottom here. And then I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to hit Mark Seam. And it should have done it. I mean, it was already marked anyway. Now the next step is I can right click in here and I can hit unwrap. Or actually, sorry, I have to hit A to select all of that and then right click unwrap. And you can see here, this is the bottom. It made a 2D representation, and then this is the top. So because the top is kind of skewed here, you can see it's facing this way. We're actually going to render this out to draw on. Can anyone see any potential issues with this thing facing this direction versus this one going up and down if I'm painting it? Like I'm going to export this to paint on, let's say. Yeah, it could be confusing. Awesome. Very good, Lorenzo. Because of the direction, right? So we have to rotate this upright to paint on it. So I'm going to hit L on this. That selects all of it. L like Larry. And I'm going to hit R to rotate. Oops. Sorry, let me undo this. Let me go to face mode. I'm going to click off to make sure nothing is selected. And I'm going to hit L on this. R. And I want to make sure that this is inside of this box. So I'm going to hit G here. Hit S to scale this down. If it's outside of this box, I can't paint on it. This represents a sheet of paper that I can paint on. Okay, let me make sure that this is, I guess this doesn't matter. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that we have this saved. Like we have this laid out. This is our 2D thing. The next thing I want to do is I want to go to texture painting. So I'm going to click the next tab, which is texture painting here. Now, it's pink here because I don't have a material attached to this object. So I'm going to click on object mode, make sure that's selected. I'll go back to texture painting. And we want to create a material. So I'm going to click on material here. I'm going to hit the plus sign. I'm going to make a new material. And it's freezing up. So I hope I didn't save it. So make sure to save yours. I'm going to save mine really quick, guys, once this is done thinking. Please don't crash. Yeah, throughout your entire process, save periodically, and then like the other reason too is like I do this. I'm working on this computer for production like all day, and so the memory is like I really need to do a restart before this class starts because there's all kinds of like different data in there. I'm gonna pause the video too. All right, I'm recording it. All right, so let me go to object mode. Make sure I have this selected. I'm gonna actually go over here, make sure that I am in, so we can actually see the material. This one. And it's showing up as this material 1. Let me change the color just to kind of see. Yeah, so it's updating. Okay, I want this to be, definitely want this to be pure white. Okay. So in texture painting mode, what I want to do is, let me go back to texture painting. I'm going to hit tab and go to texture paint here. Okay. So if I paint on this now, let's see, it's material 1. I'm going to select the color. So we go up here to the top. And like it shows the ship as white, right? But let's say I want it to be like an off-white or a light blue. I can grab my paint bucket and I can click on this. Oh, the next step I forgot to mention is I have to actually save an image off to paint on. So in this other view here, you want to click on new. And then I'm going to give this just a base color. So we can say white because my ship is white, or maybe like a little off-white or a light blue. And then I'm going to name this spaceship texture. I'm going to hit new image, and it created a new image. The thing behind that too is, sorry, let me do this again. There's 1024 by 1024. You can change the width and the height here too. All right, now back on this view here, I'm going to go back to my material here. This is material 01. I'm going to name this spaceship material. And instead of base color here, I'm going to click on this little dot, and I'm going to go to image texture. And I'm going to hit open, and I'm going to go find wherever that texture is. Did I save it in videos? Let me see where I saved that at. Videos, new folder. don't know where I saved it. Let me see where I saved that. Let me just save off another one. Should have saved it in the same folder. Sorry, guys. I just need to find this picture. Oh, sorry. Image. I haven't saved it. Save as. And then I'm just going to throw, I'll throw it in this new folder, Spaceship 02. So you have to go here, sorry, go to image, and you have to save it. This one, it's just created in memory. So now when I go to open, you can see it's right here, and we get that light blue. You can click your paintbrush here, and what I like to do is you go up to this top tab, and you can click anywhere on here, and you can kind of sample that color. So here's our red. Click this, and you can sample that same red from the scene, and you can go in here and start painting. Now, there are programs, like there's another one I use at work called Substance Painter, and you can click the bracket to make it larger. And you could see it's updating on that top one. So that's why I was saying like that you can paint right on the model, or I can get a little bit better by just kind of clicking this and use like one of those guidelines. It's better with a tablet, but
Is there no way to like just click on those squares and they fill up?
no. And this right here will just flood the whole area. Yeah, it sucks. There's a program called Substance Painter I use at work, which lets you do all of that. Yeah, it's like that's how I texture most of my characters. For now, it's kind of rudimentary in that sense.
What's the program called?
Substance Painter, I have it right here. Yeah, and you can paint like, I mean, this is all they use in the film industry is Substance Painter now for like when you look at like the Star Wars models or whatever. Like, I'm gonna have this guy. He's a good friend of mine. His name's Brian Dolan. He does a lot of production, like 3D animation production, game stuff. He used to be a past student of mine, like 20 years ago. But like, if you look at his work, you can see like Full Metal Alchemist. But this is all Substance Painter stuff. You can see here's the wireframe. Star Wars stuff. So he's a real talented guy. Then you do image and you do save. And what's cool about this is, let's go back into our camera here. I'm going to lock this. Is you're actually rendering. Let's go ahead and render this out. Like you're making the 3D model, like in the. So this is like, I know this isn't the same as like the Frankenstein monster I have coming in the scene, but the processes that you would do to make this is the same processes someone else would model, like the head of a character or another thing. So you get a little bit of a taste of it. And then later, again, I'm going to pause this.